G'day, everybody. How's it going out there? So, as a follow-up to last week's episode where we talked about a convention that was going to be held on top of another convention, that record is no longer going to be a thing. Just to get the whole information out of the way, the AWOO convention called Free For All, America's Furry Convention, which was going to be held in Tulsa, in the same station as Tales and Tornadoes, has been moved or suspended in a way. They don't plan on, according to the newsletter that they have released, they do not plan on giving up, but they have a thing here on the newsletter here about them losing their ability to hold that particular convention in that hotel that they had tried to do. And their statement is as follows. Free For All is proud to provide an event for all walks of life. It's disappointing how many humans today cannot tolerate different people, especially when they want to have a big fluffy event together. The dark side of the anthro fandom is showing its face. And some have gone so far as to target and harass members of our association and business partners. After enduring this for some time, our hotel had asked us to relocate for fear of the civil unrest threatened by those who would want to see this event be cancelled. Our venue was not prepared to deal with this harassment, but the AWOO Association is changing venues. Oh, hold on. I misread that. I was like, is that a sentence? Our venue was not prepared to deal with harassment, but the AWOO Association is. Changing venues isn't a big deal, and we aren't the first convention to have to do it. We will not be deterred, and we will be holding America's Anthro Convention regardless of any obstacles anyone throws our way. We hope you will join us in making it happen. We are so thankful for the overwhelming support we have received from everywhere in the world, except Twitter. And we can't wait to see all the best of America at America's Anthro Convention. Free For All 2022. Please be being kind to everyone and being a bright light in our world. We will announce our new location very soon. We want all of our supporters to know we have your backs. Free For All and its staff aren't going anywhere. Free For All is proudly #uncancelable. So, yes, they won't be deterred, I suppose. That's one heck of a newsletter. Probably the most, kind of the most sassiest newsletter I go. Like, yes, conventions have had to change venues before, but, I'd never before, as a convention who is changing venues, basically laid out like a sort of propaganda style thing here. There was something I noticed, by the way, as I was reading this just now. I do it live, as you noticed, because I accidentally misplaced the period there. I can't see the periods and sentences with these like little like grills in front of my face, right? So I saw an uppercase letter and I'm like, oh, that was a full sentence. Oops, my bad. It happens. Professional. Anyway, what you see here is it's funny how they go, the dark side of the anthro fandom is showing its face. So, for those of you who are not in the know, anthro fandom has become this sort of like word that is supposed to sort of separate certain artists and certain things from the concept of furry fandom. So, if somebody is feeling a bit like they don't want to associate with furries because, they've committed too many faux pas, as it were, with their faux pas, they might go, well, we're the anthro fandom. And by the way, AWOO has basically, used the words anthro fandom and things like that on their website. They don't use the word furry at all, because I think that they fall into that category where they see the furry fandom as too deviant or something like that in order to use the word furries. So they've changed themselves to the anthro fandom. Yet in this newsletter, they accidentally forgot, the lingo that they were supposed to be using. This was an opportunity for them to say, oh, the dark side of the furry fandom is showing. So, they would say, okay, this is the furry fandom, right? And the furry fandom is the evil ones, and the anthro fandom are the good ones. They had an opportunity to kind of further that sort of segregationalist mindset with verbiage, yet they failed, and they basically gave up the game. Oh, no, the anthro fandom is the furry fandom, we're just calling it something different, right? Instead of, no, the furry fandom, we're an anthro fans, we're not furry fans. There's a sort of tussle now with this decision on this. So the thing of the matter is if you take a newsletter at face value, then yes, you can empathize with this particular kind of statement. However, we do not know whether or not what the reason that the hotel decided to basically back out of their contract was for. Many people on that Twitter space claim that it is because, people became activists, furries activated, and basically shared with the hotel evidence of the problematic connection between their guest of honor and staff members with white supremacy groups and groups that are tied with those sorts of organizations. And because of this, right, they, in essence, the hotel might have backed off because they realized that they were working with individuals that might be problematic. Or, according to AWOO, maybe some of those people who called in were being more threatening and being more adamant and threatening, and the left, some of those left-wingers who were calling in were being a little more threatening, and the hotel was uncomfortable with presenting it unless they presented more security things. But that's the thing. We've already had, as we're going to go over later, we as a fandom have already experienced a convention that had to close its doors because of physical threats to the organization. And from that we learn that hotels are usually A-okay, with, having to deal with security issues and threats, as long as you got the cheddar, right? As long as you can pay for the insurance and pay for, security at that particular venue, they are absolutely, the security threat is not such a big deal, right? It's how, things about, how presidents and how politicians can go around and make speeches at grand hotels like that, is because they pay a little bit of premium for some security, and and basically it's A-okay. So the fact is, either if the hotel is like, oh no, a hotel will really go, oh no, we're not going to do business with you, it's too much of a security risk, right? This is just a bunch of furries, or I'm sorry, anthros. There is no huge security risk here, okay? Other than, nothing that hotels are usually not used to dealing with in their own way. I mean, there's a reason that these big organizations like Marriott and things like that and Hyatt have dealt with security issues before. And usually, because here's the thing, if hotels were so easily scared by security issues like this, there wouldn't have been a 2015 Midwest Fur Fest, because 2014 would have been it. 2014, the Hyatt would have went, yeah, you guys can get the F out and never come back, right? Because it's unfair to, and hotels understand that it's unfair to the people who choose their services to assemble, that they're punished for the behaviors of people who oppose them, politically or ideologically, right? So I'm sure MFF had to increase insurance after that year, right? Probably has to pay more out of pocket. I don't know that for sure. I'm speculating. But I'm sure that there was some sort of deal made to ensure that more security would be ready for the year after that, so that way they could do with it in full time. So, to me, them claiming that they got kicked out for hotel's fear for itself, the hotel was afraid for itself, I'm going to call, that's a bit suspicious to me. And the reality is that time, as it always does, is going to prove whether this newsletter holds up scrutiny or not. Basically, it's going to be this simple. Can they find another hotel? If they can find another hotel pretty readily, then I would probably say that this is more likely to be accurate. Because if they could find another hotel pretty readily, then that means that it was a private conversation between the hotel and themselves, and the hotel just wasn't comfortable, but they weren't uncomfortable with who they were. If it is that the hotel was uncomfortable with who they were as an organization and who basically, their organization seems to have ties to, or, was shown to have ties to, basically what you're going to see is that other hotels are going to already know who the AWOO Association is, who Peace Wolf is, who To the Ranting Griffin is, right? Who these people are, who this organization is. To the Ranting Griffin, by the way, is just their guest of honor. But as Screen Reaper said, the guest of honor can kind of show what kind of tone the organization, or what kind of tone that the convention is trying to set, right, on their ideals. So, in essence, they do become sort of part of the convention in and of itself that way. But long and the short, if this letter is true, they're going to be able to find a new place pretty quickly, and they would be uncancelable. But if the hotel is more wary about who they're associated with and shares that information amongst the other hotels are going to know about the problems or the issues that they have going into negotiations. And it's going to be much harder for them to find a new hotel. So we will, obviously keep an eye on that, and we'll let you know. Obviously, the guest of honor is not too happy about what happened. In that essence, I've already kind of gone over a lot of what Tu has said about the furry fandom. So I'm just gonna read his tweet here without too much interjection, and then I'll talk a little bit. The original point of furry was that you left all that shit at the hotel door. No one asked you who you voted for. No one asked you your race or religion. The point of furry was to escape from all of that. Now you're being vetted. I don't accept what the furry fandom is now, he says in response to a Lady AWOO who says, don't march in lockstep with politics equals bad person. Seriously, why are so many furries political anyway? When was the last time? Blah, blah, blah. So, I can go on for probably hours, but the best thing that you can do is just watch a video that I did in 2017 in response to a video that Tu did about basically, the furry fandom being dead. And in that, where he's complaining right now, that his ultimate complaint in this tweet here is that you're being vetted. One of the biggest things I had to point out in the video where he called the furry fandom was dead was that he put the death of the fandom on these outsiders coming into the furry fandom, and basically there was this character that he created that was a balding, aging man in a little Bo Peep costume. And in it, he basically says that the furries went up to this guy, and he uses the word the furries a lot in the royal we sense, when talking about those old days. And he basically goes up to the balding man and he goes, "Oh, you don't belong here," right? That's being vetted, right? Back in the good old days, he's like, oh, this little Bo Peep guy, we used to be able to say, hey, you're not allowed here, and they would leave, right? So basically, he's angry because he doesn't have the power to vet people like he did back in that video when he was describing the best parts about furry fandom history and why furry fandom was so great before. He's like, I could have kicked out that little Bo Peep guy all I wanted to, ha ha ha, right? So vetting has always been going on, dude, right? People in power have power and they can vet people, right? But you no longer have that power. You no longer have the power to vet people. Other people are instead vetting you like you did, not furries, you did with that guy in the little Bo Peep costume, according to your other video there. So that, and I also pointed out in that video, and it's still the same to this day, that no one has ever asked who I voted for at a furry convention ever. That's not something anyone has ever asked. And the thing is that and I noted back then, is that some people wear their politics on their sleeve. And at that point, I had brought up a picture of the Furry Raiders banner, right? They literally wear their politics on their sleeve, right? And so, that's the whole thing there. And I have to ask, if you're in an in-person event, I can understand why, if you have to ask what someone voted for, why they were asking what someone voted for, because obviously you can't see who someone voted for unless you're wearing it on your sleeve or wearing a hat, right? You can usually see what someone's race is. Can I just note that? You can ask somebody, you don't have to, it's like, hey man, are you black? You could see my skin color. Why do you have to ask? Oh, I'm colorblind. It's even someone who can see in monochrome knows I'm black, right? It's you don't have to ask somebody if they're black or white or Latina or Hispanic in person usually, because usually you can tell. If someone wants to share that information, that's fine. It's I'm 90% this, 20% that. That people would, you allow people to express themselves. You usually don't ask that information, but some people give it freely. Some people will tell you how old they are without being prompted. I'm a good old right 92. It's no one asked. It's yeah, but I just like sharing that information, right? It's he's acting as if it's some big deal, as if we're trying to segregate people. That's what he's implying here, and it's that just doesn't happen. I don't know what convention he went to. I know he was vetting people and he was segregating people according to his own witness testimony about the history of the furry fandom. Remember, click on the link, click the information for me going over that particular history lesson he gave. But the furry fandom in general just doesn't really do that, and never really has done that. And by the way, can I note? I've got two other things to note here, because I haven't talked about the first sentence yet, and that is, if the furry fandom leaves that shit at the door, then what does it say when they leave you at the door? Yeah? That you have become that thing that furries left at the door, right? Maybe that's a possibility. Maybe furries still do leave that shit at the door. It's just that you became shit. Which would make sense. Maybe that's why the deities had you call yourself too. Because you knew that they knew someday that you would be the shit that the furries left at the door. Because you've been poisoned by the pedantic of politics. Right? No, I'm apolitical! And that is, alright. Well, we'll get into that in a second. One more thing I have to note. I think you owe the fandom an apology for this last sentence. Because you said, I don't accept what the furry fandom is now. So you're using the word is, the preposition is, to describe the furry fandom. If you're using the preposition is to describe the furry fandom, then that means you believe that the furry fandom is still alive. And if you believe that the furry fandom is still alive, what the hell was that video in 2017? The furry fandom is dead! I don't accept what the furry fandom is now. So it's alive, right? Like, anyways, let's go back to that. No, you can't call me political. I'm apolitical. I'm an individual. So he did do that kind of a thing too. Like when people kept saying, well, you're part of this organization now. And he's like, stop! Why does everyone consider everything I say or do associated with someone else you're affiliated with? You're in this group. You align with. For all the people who want to be identitary independents, why can't I just represent me? I have to point out the irony in the last sentence where he's asking everybody who's an independent thinker, why can't they just be independent? So that they can be independent together and say, yeah, why can't we be independent? So, and here's the thing. Obviously, I'm very much a proponent of people representing themselves and their own views. I'm also very well aware that we live in a society that we have politicians who wish to carve up our individuality into two separate chunks that they can use to coerce, us into compliance with, their particular form of white gang warfare that is the United States, bipartisan United States government. I am well aware of that situation, right? But here's the thing. It's like people who are right-wing have seen their party go down a dark path, right? A sort of godless path, and it really hurts them, right? And of course, as soon as their party went down that godless path, the Griffin, who has never been a big fan of God in the first place, said, oh, they got rid of God? Hell yeah, I'm jumping right in! Right? And so at that time, here's the thing. Before Trump became president, the Ranting Griffin was very critical of the government in general, right? He was very, anti-Bush, he was anti-Obama, and then Trump came along, and all of a sudden, he's like, I like this guy, right? And it's like, why? It's like he is the government. Trump is the government at that point. As soon as he becomes president of the United States, he is the government. And it is up for the citizenry to be always critical of the United States government. That is the role of the United States citizen, to be a check and balance on the people they put in power. Always, 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 always. As soon as you give that up because you like the guy who's in the chair, you become part of the establishment, right? You become that. But even worse, and this is like, everyone has the right. There's some people who suck up to Biden and they could still perform it. That's a fair point. But there's a more important thing, is that there are organizations that came up under Trump that wanted to disrupt, a lot of assemblies in our culture in order to further their ends of clearing out space for whatever they wanted to do. Or because other people were having fun and that's no fun, so they have fun trying to disrupt the fun of others, right? So you have, I forgot to add a picture here. So you have this happen in basically 2018, where and you ask the question, why can't I be an individual? This one tweet is a big reason why. This one leaked screenshot from an alt-right furry board is a big reason why. Is that Griffin told them, sometime in 2017, 2018, that, I'm not sure when, the timestamp only has a time and not a date on it. He goes, I'm going to promote alt-furry, but I have to do it carefully, right? And somebody had shared that recently with him, and his response recently was, oh, that could have been, photoshopped by a 14-year-old kid or something. And Boozy Badger was quick to point out, hey, no, man, I usually like to stay out of blood feuds, but you literally said that you literally in 2018 basically responded in a way that says that this photo is real, right? And Boozy shared this particular response tweet to this back in 2018 when this picture originally leaked. Some people are worried about the screenshot. Yeah, I've been called alt-furry for so long and I didn't even know what it was. So I went to investigate. There will be a video very soon on what I found there. And Deo's response was, you got called it, so you joined and decided to make videos promoting it. I'm going to promote alt furry. What the fuck, man? So, now, to be fair, Deo also has, political leanings. The difference is that she wears her, she wears her political leanings on her sleeve and doesn't pretend to be this pseudo-centralist kind of figure. She is like, no, man, I'm pro-union, I'm pro-socialist, she is very much a person who wears her politics on her sleeve, and she gets her pictures of her punching Nazis, and she's very adamant and very open about who she is as a figure. And so furries can judge her based on that and can, react to who she actually is. Whereas, Two plays this sort of two-faced thing. I don't know if you're aware of the Batman character Two-Face, where he's trying to pretend to be an individual in the public and saying, I'm a unique individual and I'm independent. We recently had an article in Flera that tried to counter my story about, Oklahoma City FurCon, and the article in and of itself obsessed over trying to be seen as being independent and individual-minded. But as soon as I posted a newsletter from Tales and Tornadoes, the individual who wrote who authored the article that was basically trying to, say that free-for-all, they think free-for-all is the best thing since sliced bread, using, their thoughts and their opinions, basically immediately jumped on it and said, well, you guys go, basically gave away that he does not like Tales and Tornadoes, right? So that he is actually biased, right? That he actually has a bias. And there's a thing that everybody has bias, okay? And that's not a problem. There are two problems. There are two problems with bias. Bias itself is not a problem. It's like air. Everyone has it. It's like eyes and ears and a body. Everyone has it, right? Everyone has biases. Biases only become a problem in two cases. Number one, that it becomes bigotry, right? Your biases blind you to opportunities and others to opportunities that you restrict to them because you have a bias against a particular group of people, a particular, things, and that bigotry can lead you to doing harmful things to yourself and to others because you have a strong bias against, living beings, your fellow man. That's one time when bias can be really problematic. The second time that bias can be really problematic is when you pretend you have none. Which is ironic because it's like, well, no, I thought that was the whole point. It's like, no, man. If you pretend you have no biases, then you will try to sweep your biases under the rug. You won't confront them. You won't ever change them. And you have a more chance of becoming bigoted. Because as soon as a little bit of your bias comes to the surface and a little bit of your ignorance comes to the surface and someone tries to confront you about it, you're going to try to sweep it under the rug. And if it's out there in the public, you're going to sweep really hard. And if you sweep really hard, then you're going to start to blame the existence of those things you're biased against for the reason you're biased in the first place, right? So the problem too, the pretending you have no biases is actually sometimes what leads to the bigotry, right? And in this case, we see that essentially happen. We see, how Two is like, I'm an individual, I'm a free, independent individual, but behind closed doors, he is telling these people, hey man, you're a political organization and I've got your back, right? So he's not an independent person. If you are a person who wishes to be independent, my suggestion to you is this. Always understand that any organization that you are a part of, there is always a door, right? There is always a door, right, that you can walk out of. And if you find yourself in a position where you can no longer walk out the door, then you have to start questioning, are you moving towards independence, or are you dependent upon that organization? Or even worse, which may be the case in this case, is that do you find yourself in an organization that can ultimately be harmful, and you're afraid of leaving that organization or changing your ideas because you're worried about the consequences of doing so? Because a lot of the times, like they'll say, oh, the left, it's like if you say this, then there'll be heavy consequences. But it's like for the right wing, it's the same way. If you walk out the door after you become their shining star, do you really think they're going to let you go without any consequences to you, right? You can kind of get stuck in this sort of madness. And the reality is that during that, so we have to talk about alt-furry a little bit. There is a thing here, and I'll try to do this live. I accidentally forgot to add the picture here. So I'm going to try to do this one live. Why can't I be me? Did I not save it? I did not save it. It's even better. But basically, and I'll try to ramble as I'm saving this picture. The alt-furry in and of itself, one of the things that Tu complained about in the video, where he was saying that the furry fandom is dead because they're inviting people who don't have anything to do with furry fandom, and he used a coffee example, which was an awesome skit. I loved it. Like the video, by the way, the whole video is excellent. It's one of my favorite works. I still like it to this day, and I don't like to gloat about my own work, but it was definitely a fun one in an essence of like just pointing out the hypocrisies and just like laying into them. There is a hypocrisy here too, because the organization that he has chosen to group himself with literally, and I think you can see it on the screen now, literally has the same issue where the alt-furry is inviting people who are not furry and have ulterior motives against furry organizations. This was an article published in 2017 by Newsweek, not some random fluffy red guy on YouTube, not some, amateur hour kangaroo who's not a professional journalist but is sort of an amateur one. This is done by a professional journalist for a professional news organization. This is their job, okay? In 2017, which is, by the way, a year before that thing leaked, and To the Ranter Griffin says, well, I'm going to make a video, promoting these folks. Even though I just said that the furry fandom is dead and that, they're inviting non-furries, there was a part of this neo-Nazi organization that created an issue in one of our conventions and forced it to be shut down. And this is why earlier when I alluded, it's like we know what happens when a convention gets threatened, in that the hotel is going to ask for more insurance and ask for more money for security up front. This is how we know this, because Califur was shut down by the organizations that To the Ranting Griffin was promoting in his videos, right? And in saying that he was promoting them behind closed doors. The most damning link, white supremacists and alt-furries, is Nathan Gate, a young alt-right neo-Nazi. He does not consider himself a furry, but he helped create and moderate the alt-furry Discord channel. He also set up the altright.com server for the news and commentary website run by alt-right reader Richard Spencer. Gate even organized the campaign against the Califur convention in Pomona, posing as a local reporter and calling the hotel while mobilizing alt-furries to do the same on Discord. At the rally in Charlottesville, Gate recorded a 2.5-hour live stream of the day's chaotic events. In the stream, he is surrounded by neo-Nazis in white polos, armed militiamen, and even David Duke, one of the country's most prominent white supremacists. Despite these credentials, his ties to the furry fandoms have upset his prejudiced pals. I consider furries degenerates and only worked with them to accomplish common goals, like getting Califur shut down, Gates said. This organization and these people are the ones that, too, basically said to them behind closed doors that he was going to promote. An organization which says that they are not furry. A complaint under which, To the Ranting Griffin in his Furry Fandom is Dead video, said was a problem in the furry fandom. That's an issue, isn't it? This is the problem, is that this is not comedy. This is not funny anymore. This is a person who is just so inconsistent with his worldviews. He presents himself as saying something in front, while behind closed doors, he behaves as somebody else. We do believe that this person is an individual, but he's two-faced. And this is why we had to leave that at the door, is because he was upset. He's upset, and because he's upset, he got political, right? And that just happened. And it's unfortunate that it happened, but I think it's a very important lesson. You have to be careful about making what you do in the darkness will come into the light. The people you associate with behind closed doors will come to the light eventually. You can't hide it forever. And especially if you make yourself a public figure, right? Those who you associate with. Now, the thing of the matter is that you could associate independently with people and have major disagreements with them in that. I know that in Flavor.com, its editor-in-chief is frickin' Green Reaper, and Green Reaper has said things about trans people that I don't agree with. And he runs a furry website that has content that I absolutely don't agree with. But the reality is that he's footing the bills. And as long as he's footing the bills, I'll write for that platform and use it as a way to talk about the topics and the important things. And while this is political, and while this is, I will not deny that talking about this kind of stuff is political, but it's important to talk about, because you don't. If your goal is to be an independent person, if your goal is to be independent of these kind of folk, of politics, of these things, you need to be careful about the person with a serpent tongue who comes down on high and says, "If you want to be an individual again, join me," right? Because the reality is I can leave Flera if I wanted to, and I wouldn't feel like I would have any threat to my life, right? I'd be like, "Hey, I'm out, bye, Flera," and Flera would be like, "Oh God, what are we gonna do now?" They might panic a little bit, but it would move on. Dronin would still be editing there. Green Reaper would still be editing there. Green Reaper would probably have to focus a little more attention onto the site, as I would no longer be editing pieces. And because he's had to do it before when, Cross Affliction stepped down. So, that's the thing. It's like, there's freedom there. There's freedom of movement. I don't have to worry about, if I walk out the door, that some of the more adamant political figures within that political organization, right, come after me because they know where I live and I betrayed them like some sort of Judas, right? I wouldn't have to worry about that. And unfortunately, a lot of the people in that area of the country in Oklahoma sometimes behave the way that they behave because they know that their neighbors are mostly the ones in power, so they can't. Their passion about what they want to see in the world has to be a little bit more muted, mostly because of their surrounding neighbors. And that's just the reality of the whole thing. If To the Ranting Griffin really believes the things that he's doing about individuality, my suggestion to him is, please consider leaving. Please consider leaving. I would recommend that you watch the video I did on Fox Miller. and asked of him, it's like, well, if people are conceiving that you believe in neo-Nazism and that you do this, then these sets of behaviors are probably what lead them to feel that way. Here is the opportunity for you to change your direction. I will give you advice on that. You can take it or leave it. And he obviously left it. In fact, he had one of his, people accuse me of dead naming him when I said Fox Miller, even though that's not his actual name. I was just suggesting maybe change your name from Foxler to Fox Miller since you like Star Fox, right? And instead of like trying to combine these two things together and making it sound like, Fox Hitler, right? Maybe you should just try to do that. And maybe people would and get rid of those banners get rid of the banner, create a different banner that like would be like less obvious, like less symbolically tied to those historic organizations. And maybe people would change their tune. Maybe those would be steps in the right direction. Burn those banners that you have created for yourself and create new ones. And obviously some people will not come around, but I think that over time, the wound would heal. Same here, but obviously he ain't getting any younger, and obviously once you go down a route and you want to see that route to the end, sometimes you think it's too late to change, but there's never a chance where it's too late to change. If you think it's too late to change, then you are no longer an individual. You are going down a set path. You are going down a fate that you made for yourself. So, this is why I think this kind of story is important. It's not just drama. It's literally a warning as to how to not fall into these kind of traps, right? Unless you're willing to go down that road when it comes to politics, be careful where you hang your hat, right? Because your people are going to judge who you hang your hat with. And if, that's the place you want to hang your hat, then that's your freedom. But but don't be surprised when some people use their freedom to keep that shit at the hotel door. Thank you very much for watching. Kick that like, kick the subscribe button, kick a comment in the comment section. I'm sure my last one about the Oklahoma was not very well received with the like to dislike ratio, but I'm just not worried about that anymore because, hey, it got plenty of views, which I guess is the more important metric, I guess. So anyways, let me know your thoughts on that. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.